Hi everyone, I'm Lauren, and in this video I'm going to be chatting to you about my top hints and tips for making the Megan Nielsen Jarrah sweatshirt. Now, this video came as part of a kit that included all of the things you needed to make a really beautiful version using our Chica print, or it might be that you got the video as a separate thing. Either way, just remember that the video doesn't replace the instructions that come with the pattern, but do use it alongside them, and there are some little extra hints and tips that I'm going to show you that are additions to the instructions. So the main things are adding the facing to the tie fronted version and the little facing to the back neckline as well. So first of all, I'll run through the contents that were included in the kit. It will be a little bit of a checklist if you didn't get the kit from us, and then I'll talk to you about the fabric that we included in the kit, but also other fabrics that you can use to make this garment as well. So if you did get the kit from us, then inside there you will find some jersey sewing machine needles. The size 80 will be fine for this project. You've also got some stretchy Mariflex thread. So this is a special thread from Gutermann that is stretchy, and it means that you can sew stretchy fabric on your regular sewing machine with a straight stitch. You don't have to use a stretch stitch, so it makes sewing jersey garments really quick and easy because you can just use a regular straight stitch. You've also got a little me-made woven label, which is a special metallic thread edition for our 10th birthday. And then you have got your A0 pattern printout as well for all of the different variations that come with this pattern. And you can get access to the instructions and also the PDF files themselves. And the information to do that is attached to your order confirmation email from when you bought the kit, and also when you log in to the website and you look at your profile area in the files and videos section. So you do have to get the files from the Megan Nielsen website, and it tells you how to do that and that information that's there, but you do have the instruction booklet there as well, which you can choose to either print out at home yourself, or it might be that you look at it on your computer or on your device as you're completing your project. And then we are on to the fabric. So the fabric that we included in the kit, we had a choice of 3 absolutely stunning colorways of our own exclusive Chica print that was designed by Rachel Parker. And this print, some of you might recognise this print, it was originally on a viscose fabric, and to mark our 10th birthday celebrations we brought it back on this absolutely beautiful organic cotton loop back jersey fabric with some custom dyed matching 2x2 ribbing, which is also organic cotton. Now, it is quite a lightweight fabric. It means that the version of this sweater, the jumper that you're going to make, is quite a lightweight sort of spring version. It's good for the time of year that the kit was released here in April. And included in the kit is enough to make views A or view C. And it may be that you do have enough to add the funnel neck on if you wanted to do that as well, but we were mainly focusing on view A and C, those variations of this pattern. Now, the pattern is really versatile. You can use other types of fabric to make it as well. It is one of my most favourite sweater patterns. I've made lots of versions with it too. You can use thicker fleece back sweatshirting fabric, for example, or cozy colours, or a recycled sweatshirting ranges. You can also use a thicker sweatshirting as well if you wanted more of a thicker, cozier autumn winter version of the garment, and we have some thicker ranges in the shop as well. We've got a snuggly range which is really super thick, and we've also got a marled fleece back sweatshirting range as well. So there are various different options. You can use either matching ribbing like we have included in the kit, or you can also use cuffing as well. And you can also use the same fabric. So you can use the same fabric for the cuffs, the hemband and the neckband as the main fabric too if you wanted. So lots of different options and fabric combinations that you can do. I really hope you make lots of versions of this jumper. I certainly have. It's very comfortable and a really nice, quick, satisfying make. Now, in terms of pre-washing the fabric that came in the kit, I would recommend washing it at 30 degrees and then air drying it. Try and dry it as flat as you can, just so it doesn't inadvertently stretch as it is drying. I tend to fold mine up and dry it on an air dryer rack that sort of opens out. It's one from IKEA, and that is usually the best way I personally find to dry stretchy fabric, so that it stays nice and relaxed as it's drying. If you hang it up on a washing line, for example, it tends to sort of stretch out of shape a little bit as it's drying, which can then affect your accuracy when cutting out. Now, when it comes to choosing a size and variation, as I said before, it is views A and C options that we were focusing on in this kit. So there are different options for using the ribbing fabric. So you can use it for your hemband, your cuffs and your neckband, as I've done in this version here, or you could use the main fabric for the hemband as well. I feel like this version gives it a little bit more of a top feel rather than like a more of a sort of casual sweater. So it's another option that you can do there, another combination that you can do. The other variation that you can do with the ribbing is change the size of the ribbing piece that you cut out. Now, ribbing is very, very stretchy, so it means that you can get away with cutting it smaller than the pattern piece for the size that you're making because it stretches a lot. So on some of the versions, I'll show you them here, I have cut the cuffs at 75% of what the pattern piece was. I'll show you how to do that later. And then comparing it to this version here, where I have cut the cuff just as the pattern piece comes out, so you can see it's much looser. And then on the ribbing hembands, I have cut these versions out when they are at 75%, so it just sort of brings it in a little bit. It makes it a little bit more fitted at the hemband rather than it being sort of straight and more boxy down, so it can kind of bring a little bit more shape to the garment. The other variation that you can do with the ribbing as well is on the neckband, and on most of the versions I have made the neckband a little bit narrower. So this version here that I'm showing you is the neckband as it comes out of the pattern. So you can see it's quite wide, and I feel like it sort of sticks up just a little bit as it approaches my neck. Whereas on these versions here, in the version that I'm wearing just now, I have narrowed the width of the neckband by 2 centimeters or 1 centimeter when it's folded in half, just to make it a little bit narrower. But then you still cut it at the same length. Again, I'll reinforce this later when we come to it. I just want to talk you through the different variations for now. So that can be kind of a personal preference thing. If you quite like the thicker neckband, by all means just go for it. I just want to show you an option and what it looks like when you do make it a little bit narrower. The other features that you can add in as well is this really nice neck facing at the centre back neckline, and then also if you're doing the tie version, you can add a facing to the tie as well, so that when you do tie it up, you see the right side of the fabric there as well. So I'm going to talk you through how to do both of those options so that you can get a really lovely finish on your project. Now, in terms of the sizing, this is designed to be quite loose and oversized, so my body measurements correspond to the size 4 of this pattern. The sizes, the way that they're labelled in this pattern, Megan Nielsen say that they're not really linked specifically to a country's label, sizing sort of label, but just to give you some context, if I was going off like a UK sizing, I would probably be about an 8 or a 10. But in this pattern I come up as a 4. So if you're thinking of UK sizing, it's likely that you'll end up being smaller than what you feel like your UK sizing is. But my best advice is to always look at your measurements and look at the size chart. So this version here that I'm showing you now I made is in the size 4, so that will give you an idea of how the garment fits. You can see it is still quite loose, it's still quite oversized. So for the other versions of the samples that I made, I did a size 2. So I just sized down by 1 size, and you can see that the fit is just a little bit different. So again, that's a personal preference thing. It might depend on what variation you're making or what look you want to go for, but hopefully that gives you some context and idea when you come to pick a size. So first of all, before you come to cut out your project, I'm going to show you how you can draft your own facing to do the little detailing at the back neckline, and then also if you're doing the tie version, how to draw your own facing using the pattern pieces as well. It's really simple. All you need is some scrap paper. The bits of paper don't even need to be really big. You can use the same paper that were like offcuts from when you cut it out, or if you've got some dots and cross paper, you can use that. You can even use baking parchment as well, if you've got some of that in your kitchen. So it doesn't need to be anything too technical, it just needs to be some paper that you can use to make these little pieces. So you do need to get your pattern ready at the size that you're going to make before you do this. And then for the back facing, you're going to be cutting this little piece out in the fold. So you need to take your back bodice piece and trace around the neckline, and then so down the centre back and then along the neckline as well. And then if you measure 9 centimetres down from the neckline, and then you can just freehand that curve up. So you're just making a nice sort of soft curved shape. Now, if you feel unsure about doing this, you can try using a plate or some other sort of curved edge. Maybe you've got a curved rule that you can use, but it is quite a short distance. So as long as you're just sort of coming out straight a little bit from the centre back and then curving up, you know, you should be absolutely fine. And then you're going to be cutting this out, and remember that you're going to be cutting it out on the fold. So that's your little neck facing piece, so you can keep that to one side for now. And then if you are doing the tie version and you're going to be adding the facing on there as well, then trace around the tie section, continuing almost all the way to the side seam, and then a similar distance on the other side of the ties, and then just measure 1 inch or 2.5 centimetres all around that curved section, and then just smoothly join this up with the ends. And then once you've cut it out, flip the piece over and then cut, and then write on it that it is the facing for the tie version. And then when you come to cut that piece out, make sure that the writing that you've put on it is facing upwards. So you would have the fabric right side facing upwards on the table, and then you put that pattern piece on top like that. It's because it's not symmetrical, the ties aren't symmetrical, so you need to make sure that you're cutting it out with the pattern side, the right side of the fabric facing up, so that they match up later when you come to sew it on. Now when you come to cut your fabric out, if you're working on a table or higher surface, try not to let the fabric hang off the edge of it. Try and let the weight of all the fabric be on the table, just so it doesn't get accidentally stretched out as you're cutting it out. And you'll see in the instructions that it gives you the cutting layouts for cutting it out on the flat. Now, depending on what version you're making, you don't have to cut it out in the flat. You can just create folds in the fabric where you need them for the size that you're making to cut it out. And I actually found that I could get everything all cut out at once by folding it in and making one fold slightly wider than the other so that the sleeve piece would fit on. If you are cutting out the tie version, then obviously that's asymmetrical, so you do have to cut that out on the single layer because, you know, the left and right sides aren't the same. But then when you do come to cut out your back bodice and you come to cut out your sleeve, you can just fold the fabric over so that you're not having to cut those parts out on the single layer. Now, when you come to create the folds in the fabric, or if you're measuring your front bodice piece, making sure that it's straight on the grain of the fabric. The fabric doesn't have a top and bottom, by the way. You don't need to worry about pattern matching at all. It's completely abstract, so just place your pattern pieces wherever they fit on. Don't worry about the pattern. What I usually do is create the fold, and then I'll look along the fold of the fabric and try to see those little lines that are forming the knitted stitches in the fabric, and I'll try to get them as level and as straight along the fold as I can. You can also look to the selvage as well and where it's printed, and use that as a bit of a guide to getting it straight when you come to cut out, so you can use those things to help you get everything lined up nice and accurately. Now, just remember that the seam allowances on this project are very narrow. They are 1/4 of an inch, so just make sure that if you're snipping into your notches that you do make the snips quite small, so that you don't end up with a hole in your seam later. Or you could mark them with a tailor's tack or with some chalk, probably on the wrong side of the fabric because the chalk might blend in with all of the colours on the right side. So just watch out for that if you are snipping in, that it is just little snips that you're doing. Now, as I was mentioning before, because the ribbing that we included in the kit is very stretchy, I reduced the width of the ribbing to 75% for the hemband and the cuff versions on some of my samples. It's really easy to do that. All you have to do is fold the pattern piece in half and then fold it in half again, so you've effectively quartered it, you've made it into 4 sections, and then just fold one of those sections back. so that you're just cutting out 3/4 of the pattern piece. You might want to use it again in the future, so I would suggest just folding it as opposed to cutting it off. And then what you'll have to do is just find the new center point of those pieces, because that'll help you when you come to match up your notches later. Now for the neckband, as I mentioned before as well, in quite a few of the samples I did narrow the neckband too, so the length was kept the same. I didn't take off 1/4 of the length, that was just cut out the length as the pattern piece comes for the size that you're making. But it's the width, or like the height of the neckband, that you can choose to make narrower if you want. So it's either 2 centimeters in total, or when it's folded in half you're taking off 1 centimeter, which is effectively 2 because the thing's folded in half. Again, as I said before, this is a personal preference thing. You can choose what aesthetic and what look you like at the neckline. Then if you're doing the tie version and you're cutting out your facing, then you can place that onto your fabric. Just remember, you need to have the writing facing up as you do that. If you're finding that you can't fit that whole piece onto your fabric, you can cut it in 2 sections as well. So you can just cut it in half where the top little curved bit is, and then just add on 1/4 of an inch seam allowance so that you can then fit those pieces on in smaller sections of your fabric. I did try that on one of the samples to make sure it wasn't too bulky or anything, and in this particular fabric it was absolutely fine. So if you do need to do that, and don't worry about it, but if you can fit it in all in one piece onto your fabric, then obviously that's a little bit easier and quicker than having to seam it. So just a few options there depending on what size and variation you're making. And then of course don't forget to cut out your little neckband facing as well. It's just a little section that you need, and you might find that you can fit it in above where you've cut out the front or back bodice. You can sort of fit it in that little curved bit above there. Now when you do come to place your pattern pieces onto the ribbing that we've included in the kit is a lot wider than standard ribbing that you can get. So it might be that you can place your pattern pieces on in a slightly different way to what the layout is in the instructions, just so that you can get more economical use out of it. Just remember to cut 2 hembands for front and back, 2 of your cuffs, and then 1 for your neckband. Now when you do actually come to sew the garment together, you can of course use your overlocker if you've got one of them. If you don't, absolutely no problem at all. Use the stretchy Mariflex thread that we gave you in your kit, and use a regular straight stitch on your sewing machine, and your seams will be able to stretch with the fabric because the Mariflex thread is nice and stretchy. Now it is recommended that you increase the length of the stitches a little bit. The standard stitch length is 2.5 millimeters. It's suggested that you increase that to 3 millimeters with the Mariflex thread, and it may be that you need to slightly alter your tension as well. It might be that you need less tension on the thread. Now I found in my machine I didn't need to change the tension, so I would just suggest that you do some tests on some scraps with your specific machine and see if it seems like you need to make any alterations to that before you start to actually construct your garment. Now the first bit of construction that you have got to do is sewing your shoulder seams, which is pretty straightforward. It is a drop shoulder on this garment, so the shoulder seam is quite long and you want it to be able to sort of move over your shoulder nice and freely, so you can just sew it there and it's as easy as that. I would suggest that you put your neckband on next before you put your sleeves on, just so that you've got less fabric to wrangle around with as you put your neckband on. Now it is easier if you press your neckband in half before you join it into circles. It's always easier to press things that are flat, so you want to fold it in half with what effectively becomes wrong sides together. Now I found with this particular ribbing fabric, it can vary between ribbing fabrics, there's not really a right and a wrong side, but on the ribbing that I was using, I felt like on one side the ribs looked a little bit closer together than they did on the other side. So I treated the side where they looked a bit closer together as the wrong side of the fabric. Now I would suggest to you that don't get too hung up on it. It doesn't really matter as long as you're consistent. So as long as every bit of ribbing that you put onto your garment, you're treating the right side of the fabric the same for all of them, but it doesn't really matter what side it is. So once you've got it pressed in half with wrong sides together, you then need to join it into loops. So you're sewing that little seam there. That seam then becomes attached to your shoulder seam. So the notches that are marked in the neckline help you to stretch it out onto your neckline opening. So your center front, your center back, and your other shoulder seam. So you'll notice that the the little notches that are on, that you'll transfer onto your neckband piece from your pattern piece, aren't quarter points, because remember, the front neckline is lower and therefore you need a bit more neckband to go in your front neckline than you do at the back. It will be smaller, of course. It's supposed to be smaller, so it means that once you've matched up those points of the shoulder seams in the centre front and centre back, you will have to stretch the ribbing, the neckband, to fit into the opening. So you want to try and keep the main bodice fabric nice and relaxed, but you're just stretching the ribbing itself so that it fits in and all of the raw edges come together. If you're using an overlocker, it might be that you feel like you want to stitch it on the machine first and then you could overlock the edges afterwards, or if you're just using a regular sewing machine, just sew it with the stretch stitch and your stretchy Mariflex threads, and then you're all done there. Now you can add on your little fancy neckline facing, and you'll see this technique used in a lot of ready-to-wear garments. It gives a really lovely finishing touch. Obviously it's only you that sees it, but I think that still is important because it makes the garment feel special when you're wearing it. So what you need to do first of all is you can finish the bottom edge, that curved bottom edge. If you've got an overlocker, you can overlock it. If you're working on a sewing machine, you can zigzag it or overcast it. So on some versions, I then left it like that, so that you could either see the overlocked edge or the zigzagged edge. On a couple of other versions, I tried pressing it back by the width of an overlocker stitch. So I overlocked it and then pressed back by the overlocker stitch. But obviously you could still press it back if you don't have an overlocker. Just make it a very narrow turning, maybe like 1/4 of an inch to 3/8 of an inch. And then you can do a little bit of decoration on it. So you can use some of the print that is on the selvage. So you could either use the Chica Cheetah bit, you can cut round it, or the little dots that are on the selvage as well. So you can see different sort of combinations of what I've used in some of the samples here. And you're basically sewing it on like a patch. If you do have some scraps of lightweight interfacing, or you've got some stretch fix scraps, you can put that onto the back of the fabric to make it a little bit more stable if you find it easier to control that. Press your neck facing in half, so you've got the centre point, and then you can centre your little bit that you want to sew on there. You can also tuck in your little me-made label, woven label under there as well. The other option is that you could cut a little patch just from the main fabric itself that's a different part of the print than what's on your facing. And again, you can tuck your little me-made woven label in there and just again sew it on like a patch, so just a regular straight stitch around the outside edge of that little section. Or you could sew that me-made woven label on like a little patch as another alternative. If you didn't want to put any of the selvage design on it. So there's options there for how to customize it. Of course, you could leave it totally plain if you wanted to as well. And then when you actually come to attach this little neckline facing onto your garment, you want to be matching up the center point of the facing with the center back notch or the center back line on your garment. And you want to make sure that the right side of the facing is touching the right side of the back bodice, and then the neckband will sort of be sandwiched in between. So I just pinned it on with my pins in at 90 degrees, and then I stitched it so that I could see my line of stitching that I'd done when I stitched my neckband onto the main garment. And you basically want to stitch directly over that again. So you're just stitching through that. Then you can flip your neck facing into the garment, onto the inside of the garment, press it nice and flat, and then you're just going to be doing a line of top stitching around that bottom curved edge of the facing. So you will see a line of stitching on the outside of the garment when you do this. That's what's supposed to happen. As I said before, this is a really common feature in quite a lot of ready-to-wear garments that you'll see in the shops too. And so you're just top stitching that on, and then as I said before, it might be that you've pressed it under, so you then don't see any sort of finished edge there. Or it might be that you see your overlocked edge or the zigzag edge as well. So there's a few different choices for how to do it, but that's kind of the principle of how you sew on. So it's a really nice, quick, simple, easy way that you can add a lovely professional finish to the inside of your garment there. So once that's on, it's then time to set your sleeves in. They're getting set in the flat because it's a drop shoulder. You're going to be putting the sleeves on before you sew the side seams of the garment. So you've got a centre notch in the middle of your sleeve head, and the sleeve is symmetrical, so there's not a front and the back to the sleeve like there are with some other sleeves when you put them in, so you can put either one on either side. And then you're going to be getting that sewn in. Once you've got your sleeve sewn in, then you're doing your side seams and your sleeve seams all in one, so it's like one big long stitch all the way around, and then your top starts to really come together and look like something that you can wear. And then it's time to put your cuffs on. So you are going to be sewing the short ends of the cuffs together, either on your overlocker or on your sewing machine. If you did it on the sewing machine, you can press the seam allowances open, and then you're going to be folding it in half with the wrong sides of the cuff together. If you overlocked it, one thing that you can do is find the centre point, like fold it in half and sort of crease it, and then just make a tiny little snip into the overlocked seam, not all the way obviously, or a hole will form, but just to the line of stitching, and then you can separate out the seam allowance of the overlocked edges and fold it in half, and it just helps to spread out the bulk where that overlocked seam is there. Press it in half, and then it's time to fit it onto your sleeve. Now, if you did cut your cuff out at 75%, you will have to stretch the cuff to fit into the sleeve. This is normal, it's totally fine. Just make sure that you're stretching it nice and evenly all the way around. Put your pins in at 90 degrees to hold it in place, and then again, either overlocking it or sewing it on the sewing machine. Then if you're doing the version that does have the hemband, it's time to get that sewn on. Now remember, if you did cut your ribbing out at 75% of the pattern piece, then you will have to you'll have to quarter it again. So you have your two side seams where you'd sewn your hem front and back together, treating it a bit like the cuff as you did before, pressing it in half with the wrong sides together, and then you need to find the centre front and the centre back, so that you can then match that to your bodice. And again, obviously you're going to have to be stretching the ribbing hemband to fit onto the main bodice, which is normal. That's what's supposed to happen. That's what then pulls everything in and makes it sort of cling to your body a little bit more and give it a little bit more shape. And then again, sewing it on with your overlocker or with your regular sewing machine and your Mariflex thread. And if you're making that version, well done, you're done. As quick as that. A really lovely, nice, simple, quick, easy make. Now, if you're doing the tie version of the garment, I would suggest that you could get that facing even sewn on before you start to do any of the other construction methods, just so that you've got less fabric to sort of deal with when you're putting the facing on. So right sides together. If you want, actually, you can finish off the top edge with an overlocker. The fabric doesn't fray anyway, so it's not really that important, but you can do it if you want, if you like to have your seams on the inside neatened and you do have an overlocker. If you don't worry, just leave it. And then you're going to be sewing all the way around the shape of the tie with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. This is the hem allowance on that version, so you just want to continue that throughout the edge of the facing. Then you're going to be clipping into the seam allowances here, especially at the point, so you want to really trim them back so that they're nice and small, help you get nice shaping as you turn it the right way around. And then you can clip into the curve at the very top corner, so just cutting little triangles out of that. Then turn it the right way around and give it a good press. So if you're doing this before you do any other construction, just pause there at that moment. Or if you ended up putting the facing on once you've actually already done your side seams and done the rest of the construction, then what you can do is then just press the hem allowance around the whole rest of the front and the back bodice as well. So that's at 1/2 inch. Again, if you've got an overlocker and you want to finish off that hem turning edge, you can do that at this point. So you can overlock it like I've done in this version here. You can see I've overlocked it all. But if you don't have an overlocker, don't worry about it. As I said, it won't fray, so you can just leave it. And then once you've got that all pressed, you're then going to be doing a line of top stitching that is the hem that then goes all the way around the tie shaping as well. So all the way around at just less than 1/2 inch, so that you're catching your turning there, and then the line of top stitching just looks consistent all the way throughout your tie as well. once you've got that done, then you can also just stitch along the top edges of your facing too, just to keep them nice and flat. And the stitching really blends in with the fabric. I don't think you really see it once it's on there and once it's tied, and it just helps to keep that facing really lovely and flat there. So I really hope that you have enjoyed seeing those hints and tips. You like giving those little extra things a try as well, and you just have fun making this garment and of course wearing it as well. If you've got any questions or you need any help, please reach out. You can join the Private Sewing Society Facebook group for anybody who's bought a kit or a video. Just remember to say what kit or video that you have purchased when you request to join. You can email or call the shop as well. The G&G team and I are always more than happy to help and support you in your dressmaking projects. So thanks for watching, happy sewing, and I will see you next time. Bye.